and free on all platforms.
Take a look at this shocking video that could be filed away among the things you do not want to experience firsthand. Tourists were able to escape this massive avalanche in Kyrgyzstan. The avalanche was a result of a glacier that collapsed, causing ice and snow to roll down the mountainside. The person filming the video was able to take cover as the avalanche came right at them.
Oh, dear God.
Several hikers had to be treated for minor injuries. While President Biden touted the first bipartisan gun reform in decades, his event was interrupted by a Parkland dad, Manuel Oliver.
You have to do more.
Because, let me finish my comment. Let him talk. Let him talk.
Standing by to join us, why he felt compelled to speak up, coming up. Right before going on trial for contempt of Congress, the about face by one of former President Trump's top advisors, Steve Bannon, now says he's willing to testify before the January 6th committee. Bannon was charged for defying a congressional subpoena. The committee is holding a hearing tomorrow focusing on the violent mob at the Capitol. Tonight, the major wildfire that's spreading through one of America's crown jewels, Yosemite National Park, and putting the mighty sequoias in danger. Amidst the windswept plains of Wyoming, a dark reality.
How often do you think about Lyle?
Daily. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about him now. After his death.
Our journey to the U.S. state with the highest suicide rate in America and the fight to change that, not only there, but across the country. The shocking twist in the Amber Heard trial, the actress's attorney now claims she should get a new trial because one of the jurors who found her liable for defaming her ex-husband Johnny Depp was never even called for jury duty. 30 years and $10 billion of planning later, tonight we're showing you the highest quality photo of the cosmos humanity has ever seen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with a major reversal for former Trump Chief of Staff Steve Bannon on the eve of what's expected to be another bombshell January 6th hearing tomorrow afternoon. Bannon now says he wants to testify before the January 6th committee, but he wants to do so publicly and not behind closed doors. This comes after he had initially stonewalled the committee for months and claimed executive privilege. But just today, a judge said his trial for contempt of Congress will go forward regardless of whether or not he testifies. Bannon's actions are likely to come up at tomorrow's committee hearing, which sources tell ABC News will focus on alleged connections between far-right groups and those in the president's inner circle. This hearing will also be the first one since President Trump's former White House counsel Pat Cipollone sat for a video deposition with the committee. Our congressional correspondent Rachel Scott leads us off tonight from Washington.
Tonight, a federal judge appointed by former President Donald Trump refusing to delay the trial of Steve Bannon, despite Bannon's last-minute offer to testify before the January 6th committee. On January 5th, Bannon had urged Trump supporters to head to Washington.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in.
Why did you blow off Congress?
Bannon has refused to cooperate with the committee, citing executive privilege, even though he had not worked in the White House for years.
And from the start, he said he's willing to comply if they just resolve the privilege issue, which he feels he's bound by.
Now, with the trial just days away, Trump suddenly giving Bannon the green light to testify. But prosecutors fired back, saying Trump's own lawyer told them the former president never actually invoked executive privilege in the first place. Prosecutors insisting the only thing that has really changed is that Bannon's finally about to face the consequences of his decision.
And ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott joins us now. Rachel, this is really such a remarkable about-face for Steve Bannon, a close ally of the former president. What does the committee expect to learn from Bannon once they finally hear from him?
Well, the committee points to his own words just the day before the January 6th insurrection, predicting that it would end in chaos. They say that says that he had really specific knowledge about the events on January 6th before they occurred. And really, there's still so many questions about the run-up to January 6th. We know that there were sort of these meetings at the so-called war room at the Willard Hotel. Steve Bannon was a part of those meetings, and the committee is still trying to get insight into what was said and connect that to the violence that we saw here at the Capitol, Lindsay.
And turning now to the things on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue today, the president held that ceremony at the White House celebrating the passage of the new bipartisan gun bill. The speech also comes in the aftermath of last week's tragic 4th of July shooting in Highland Park, Illinois. Here's what the president had to say.
Will not save every life from the epidemic of gun violence, but if this law had been in place years ago, even this last year, lives would have been saved. It matters. It matters. But it's not enough, and we all know that.
Rachel, what was the president's goal with this speech?
Well, the president here, in many ways, trying to celebrate what has been sort of the most meaningful bipartisan gun reform legislation to come out of Congress in nearly 30 years. So the president taking that moment, you know, in the weeks after this legislation was passed, and in the days after, rather, we saw that Roe versus Wade was overturned. The president signed that bill into law, I think, just 20 to 46 hours after that. And so the president really taking a moment here to try and tell the country about what was actually passed, have this moment at the White House that he didn't get to have just a few weeks ago, Lindsay.
But of course, we also saw the president's speech interrupted by Parkland shooting parent Manuel Oliver. What did he have to say, and how did the president respond?
Yeah, this was really quite a moment, something that we normally don't see on White House ground. You see him there. This is the father of a Parkland student that was killed, expressing extreme frustration that this bill that was just signed into law does not go far enough. And the president says so himself. He says that, in fact, does not go far enough. Democrats wanted an assault weapons ban included in this package. We know that ended up getting scrapped because it did not have enough Republican support. But you heard from that father there. He says this is not a moment of celebration simply because this bill does not do everything it needs to do to prevent the next mass shooting from happening, Lindsay.
And of course, we're going to talk to Mr. Oliver in just a little bit. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you as always. We continue our conversation now with Congressman Tony Gonzales, a Republican who voted for the new bipartisan gun bill and represents the city of Uvalde, Texas, where, of course, 19 children and 2 adults were killed in a school shooting back in May. Congressman, we thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, were one of 14 Republicans in the House who voted for the Safer Communities Act. Earlier this year, you tweeted that you would, quote, do everything I can to oppose gun grabs from the far left. So what was so different then about this time and this bill that it ultimately won your vote?
Yeah, Lindsay, thank you for having me. You know, part of the decision on this legislation and others has always been this. One, would this legislation have prevented the Uvalde shooting? And the Safer Community Act absolutely would do that. The other part was this going to infringe upon constitutional rights? And this piece of legislation would not do that. The last part of why I voted yes on the Safer Community Act is this is the largest investment in U.S. history in mental health. We always talk about it, but we absolutely need it more than ever. And it's not only for urban America, it's for rural America as well. So I was proud to support this legislation. I'm glad it's signed into law.
What aspect of this legislation in particular would have prevented the Uvalde shooting from happening?
Yeah, the biggest aspect is extensive background checks for juveniles. You know, there's no reason that the Uvalde shooter should have ever been able to purchase that firearm. Not because he was 18, not because it was an AR, but because he was mentally unstable. And now that this piece of legislation is signed into law, you know, the Uvalde shooter had an extensive juvenile record of mental illness. And this is one of the pieces of a gaping hole that has now been signed into law. It doesn't solve everything, but it moves the ball forward. The other aspect of it, too, is mental health isn't just about the negative and the violence. I'd argue there's a lot of Americans dealing with anxiety and depression that we need to get in the forefront of, and the Safer Communities Act exactly does that.
You were the lone Texas House Republican to break away from your party and support this bill. How difficult of a position was that for you to take?
You know, Lindsay, I represent a district that is kind of split down the middle. So everything I do, I have to answer to my constituents. And this piece of legislation is no different. One of the things that I did was I leaned into it and I kept my Second Amendment activists, my gun manufacturers involved every step of the way. That way there weren't any surprises. When I talked about it not infringing upon the Constitution, that's not my words, that's their words. So that was one area that it was able to help out. The other part I'd say is, look, there's an appetite for bipartisanship in America, and I think it shouldn't stop here. I represent 42% of the southern border. I think there's an opportunity for immigration reform. You know, sadly, the 53 migrants that were found dead in the back of a trailer, that was in my district as well. So I'm hoping that this piece of legislation is the start of many things, and we can look at it not as Republicans, not as Democrats, but as Americans. How can we bring America together for the betterment of everyone?
And Congressman, you also shared a really powerful personal story about your own childhood growing up in a home where you were a witness to domestic violence. You tweeted that, quote, "School was my sanctuary from the chaos at home." How did that weigh on your decision to have you vote for this bill?
Yeah, no, it's a very personal story, and I spent 20 years in the military. I retired a Master Chief. I was a cryptologist. I held a top-secret clearance, and when people asked me how my day was, I said it was fine, and then they asked me what I did, I said a little this, a little that. So I never really shared my life experiences. Now, as a member of Congress, there is nothing private about it, and part of that is my upbringing, where I was in a very violent environment. Matter of fact, I remember spending time at a battered women's shelter with my mother. Those moments have never left me, and it weighed in heavily. Looking at it, you know, we have to protect the innocent. We, being lawmakers, have to protect the innocent. We have to make sure that we never infringe upon our Constitution as well. And I think we can do that. We've shown we can do that by the passing of the Safer Communities Act.
You were also at the Rose Garden ceremony this morning with President Biden hailing the passage of the new gun bill. At that event, of course, we saw a parent from the Parkland shooting, Manuel Oliver, interrupt the president's speech, imploring him to do more. Oliver was eventually escorted out. But we know that a lot of parents, including those in your own district, want to see more action taken. So we'll also put that question to you. What more can be done?
Yeah, I think this is a start. And for every parent that lost a loved one, I think this is important to show that Congress can work, that Washington can pass meaningful legislation. There was another a family member there, a survivor of one of the Parkland victims, was Max Schachter, and he pushed the Luke and Alex Act. And he has been pushing this legislation ever since Parkland. And guess what? That piece of legislation was embedded in the Safer Communities Act, which would help everyone. So I think there's a lot of positives to take away from it, but we can't stop here. We can't, you know, give a victory lap, if you will. This is a moment. Hey, how can we make Congress work again? And to me, it goes, what's the next thing we can work on? Immigration reform, securing our border, I think is an opportunity there.
Congressman Tony Gonzales, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay.
And we are joined now by Manuel Oliver, who lost his son Joaquin in the tragic Parkland, Florida shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. As we mentioned earlier, Mr. Oliver was escorted off of the White House premises after interrupting the president's speech today. Mr. Oliver, we thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with what happened today. The president's speech was intended to mark a significant milestone for the country, the passage of the first major gun safety legislation in decades. Clearly, you didn't think the legislation is significant enough. What was the message that you were hoping to get across today?
Well, I think that the way you put it out there, it gives you the right answer. That this is the first legislation that we have in 30 years. Are you kidding me? Like, how come the nation that has more victims from gun violence decides to wait 30 years to pass this package of bills? There is no reason to believe that this is the way that we should accept our society to become. Like, what I did today was a call out from a father, from a citizen, to do better job. I'm asking the President of the United States specifically today to open an office that will make sure just any other issue is being handled by a group of people designated by the president. He should designate a group of people and a director to work on this direction. Like, It's a no-brainer. And by the way, no one needs to vote for that. So the congressman that you were interviewing before me I was impressed when he said that he will also need to be concerned about his gun manufacturers. That was pretty ironic.
It's been 4 years since the shooting in Parkland, Florida. Sadly, this year alone, nearly 900 children under the age of 18 have been killed in a shooting incident. What kind of legislation would you actually celebrate as going far enough, or at least being a significant start, that you think that would really be helpful in trying to prevent these mass shootings that we're seeing so frequently?
Why are we forcing to celebrate anything? Why are we calling this celebration? How can we do that? That is my first frustration. Like, there's nothing to celebrate in a nation that is well known by being the #1 nation in the whole planet that has more guns than people. So there is no space for looking for a celebration. I think that's the first mistake. We need to look for results. I think there was no need for this event, actually. I think that the president should have just direct a message to the nation saying, hey, good job, guys. Keep on doing. I'm very concerned that you left out of the discussion the ban of assault weapons and a universal background check and raising the age. But guess what? People that is out there, like me, will take care of that part. I was expecting that as, I will take that as a better response from a leader of a nation that calls itself the #1 nation in the planet.
We just heard from that Texas congressman who said that he felt that this legislation would have prevented Uvalde. Do you agree?
We don't know. He doesn't know. I don't know. If that's the case, well, shame on him. He should have bring it before, right? Like, this is exactly what I won't take as a solution or as a normal. Difference between the person that you were interviewing before is that he has not felt the loss of a loved one. I have. However, I have been also out there working a lot, concerned about other people losing their lives. You asked a direct question to him. A Parkland father, Manuel Oliver, he knows who I am. I'm pretty sure he knows. And then his answer was about another Parkland father. We all have the right to react in any way. I think we deserve that right. But the question was directed to what he thinks about what I said. And I wonder if he really thinks that we do need this office, an office of state named by the president that will prioritize gun violence, just like they did with COVID and they do in any other nation when something like this happens.
You, of course, have emerged, as you just said, as a major gun control reform advocate, pushing the Biden administration to prioritize legislation that would reduce gun violence. Last year, of course, we remember that you protested for weeks outside of the White House until you got that meeting with senior Biden administration officials. And then just a few months ago, you climbed the construction crane near the White House, pressuring the administration to prioritize gun violence prevention. Is this a matter of something that the president is able to do, or do you believe that this is really in the hands of Congress? I mean, obviously you're saying that you believe that the president would be able to create this office, but he has kind of said or alluded to the idea of his hands really being tied and that Congress has to do something.
Not for this, not for what I'm asking for. By the way, we sent a letter asking for this a week ago. For what we are asking for, there is no need for anyone to approve it. Joe Biden is the president of the United States, and he can create a group of people with a director that will address any issue in the nation. I think it makes perfect sense for him to take advantage of this momentum and just add that solution to it. And by the way, this will be a solution directly from the president. So he will receive all the credit and the merit that he will deserve after making that decision. Now, this is what I said today. This is exactly what I shouted out to President Biden that already knows me. Is that a crazy thing to do? I don't think so. I think a crazy thing to do is to keep on letting these things receive a treatment of a normal situation in our society. I refuse to do that. I reject that response. We need to be more aggressive, and I invite you to be more aggressive because guess what? Gun violence is very aggressive and it will be aggressive again if we don't stop it.
As someone who has personally experienced the loss of a child to gun violence, what do you say to other parents, particularly those perhaps in Uvalde who are no doubt still struggling through their own grief right now?
Well, at this point and after 5 years, don't allow anybody to use your voice. Don't allow anybody to use your the legacy of your kids. We all know that your kid deserves, your loved one deserves to be here, and the reality is that it's not. That's my beautiful son Joaquin at the Yankee Stadium that you're showing right now. We were together having fun, watching a baseball game. I remember that day. I took that picture, looked at him showing the tickets. I had fun with my son, a lot of fun. And no one is going to take that away from me. Those marvelous, fantastic 17 years, but that pain is here with me. And I will carry it, and I will interrupt the Pope if I need to send a message to a nation that is urging for change.
Understood. Manuel Oliver, we thank you so much once again for talking with us and giving us your time.
Thank you very much for the interview. Have a great day.
Now to the race to save part of one of the crown jewels of our park system, Yosemite National Park, and its rare and special trees. A massive wildfire is burning towards some of the oldest giant sequoias on the planet as a new heat wave spreads across the west. The Washburn fire has roared to life, doubling in size in just 24 hours. More than 1,600 residents and visitors have been ordered to flee. Will Carr reports from the park.
Tonight, the desperate fight to save the sequoias in Yosemite National Park. More than 500 firefighters battling the flames from the air and on the ground. Crews digging fire lines and removing dead debris. We have seen fire crews attacking this area. You can see this brush is bone dry. It is perfect fuel for this fire, and you can feel the heat coming off those flames. The Washburn fire growing tonight, already scorching more than 2,000 acres, doubling in size in just 24 hours. It's now 25% contained.
It's scary. I'm just hoping the firefighters, they know what they're doing. I'm just hoping that they keep it that way as much as possible.
Some flames reaching the sequoias in the park's iconic Mariposa Grove. Firefighters quick to jump on them. The park home to some 500 sequoias, including the ancient 200-foot-tall grizzly giant.
The fire did get into the grove a little bit, and it didn't get much further. And part of that is because there's been a history of prescribed fire in here to really create a fuel situation where there's not a lot to burn on the ground.
Those prescribed fires intentionally set, protecting the trees, allowing them to grow. Crews setting up sprinklers to protect the trees, soaking the base of the trees and increasing the humidity. While fires have threatened these parts for centuries, hotter temperatures and drought conditions linked to climate change are creating a perfect storm for these fires. Conditions are drier, hotter, and windier, creating the most dangerous conditions seasoned firefighters have ever seen. More than 1,600 residents and campers ordered to evacuate the area. Satellite images showing smoke from the blaze stretching as far as the Bay Area.
Lots being done to try to preserve those trees. Our thanks to Will Carr. Tonight in Japan, preparations are underway for the funeral of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated on Friday. A hearse carrying his coffin arrived at a temple in Tokyo where mourners paid their respects. Meanwhile, the investigation into the suspect's motive continues as we learn new details about his homemade weapon in a country where gun violence is extremely rare. ABC's Bob Woodruff has the latest from Tokyo.
Tonight, we're learning more about the possible motive in the shocking assassination of the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Police say 41-year-old Tetsuya Yamagami, a former member of the Japanese Navy, confessed to killing Abe during a campaign event Friday, and that he planned the attack for about a year and reportedly had planned to use an explosive. But in order to target only Abe instead of a large group, he decided to use a gun instead. Japanese media also reporting that the gunman allegedly decided to attack Abe after watching a video message Abe sent to his mother's church, which the gunman blamed for her financial ruin. That church, a controversial group called the Unification Church, known in the U.S. as the Moonies, named after their founder, Sun Myung Moon. But the Unification Church said there is no record of asking the suspect's mother for large donations. Authorities also acknowledged security failures. and are investigating how the gunman was able to get so close to Abe, allegedly firing 2 shots from a homemade gun, seen here, 2 barrels bound together with black tape. The suspect reportedly telling police he learned how to build guns from videos posted online.
Our thanks to Bob Woodruff. When we come back, unfollowing through with a multi-billion-dollar deal to buy Twitter. So how is Elon Musk's attempts to bow out and Twitter's promise to sue impacting the stock market? We're taking a look by the numbers, plus a guilty plea from a real housewife. How much time behind bars the Salt Lake City star is now facing. But first, along the beautiful landscape of Wyoming is a struggle, the highest suicide rate in the entire country. Tonight, meet the people who are working around the clock to try to bring support to those who need it most.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a 3rd hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
The hottest views in daytime are happening right here.
We talk about things on this show that people don't talk about.
That I can't wait to see.
Honest takes from strong women.
We need all hands on deck, and we need it right now. This is the time to speak out.
Unafraid to get real.
We stick by our points of view.
We're all seeing it differently, and that's the beauty of The View.
And that's why the most watched #1 daytime talk show is The View. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on. It's poison, it's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live. Take America's #1 news with you, anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you, anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Tonight, police are searching for an accused killer targeting 7-Eleven stores in Southern California. Authorities say 5 people have been shot at 4 locations, killing 2 people. Police released surveillance images of the suspect. They believe at least 3 of the shootings are connected. The shootings are happening as 7-Eleven marks its 95th anniversary. It is dark and sometimes invisible. This epidemic of suicide is a major public health concern and is among the leading causes of death in the United States. And now a new lifeline is on the horizon. 988 is a number designated as a new 3-digit dialing code to connect anyone in need of a counselor. That service is expected to launch in just a few days, but how will it be implemented and will people be receptive? ABC's Trevor Ault takes us to the windswept plains of Wyoming, where people are hopeful this new service will save lives.
I've never been angry at my son. I've always been angry at me.
The seconds pass inevitably. This year, Lyle Nyberger should be 33. Instead, he stays 17, forever frozen in the memory of his father, Lance.
As you get into it and talk to other people, all of them say, we're in a life we never wanted to have. We're all in the cowboy up attitude. You know, real men don't cry. Real men don't have problems.
Was that something that you subscribe to?
You know, it's inbred into me. We all have problems. We all have something go wrong, and we all need help at times. And when you learn that you don't need help and you just go on, maybe that makes life a lot tougher.
They say in Wyoming there's two seasons, winter and wind. Sometimes bitter and biting, others just a whisper. But when you're here, you feel it. And these days, the same can be said about suicide. In a region known morbidly as the Suicide Belt, Wyoming has the highest rate in America. Its impact so widespread, it feels as present as the wind.
Okay, and I'm Lance Nyberger. I'm the chair of the task force, and again, thank you for being here.
The Natrona County Suicide Prevention Task Force is well aware of the problem. They meet once a month in Casper to plan events, pool resources, and keep track of the lives lost. Top of mind today, another first responder has died by suicide.
Well, 2 days ago, we had our 6th for the year, and it was a first responder on duty. That's a big number in a year to have that happen.
And there's a number of factors putting Wyoming at high risk. Many residents are isolated. And with more guns per capita than anywhere else in America, residents have more access to lethal firearms than mental health professionals. One University of Utah study posits the altitude could be a factor. According to a Gallup poll, the Mountain West is home to some of the happiest Americans, and yet it consistently has higher rates of depression and suicide.
Year to date last year, my officers had responded to 256 persons who were considering suicide. And this year, we have seen an absolute negligible change. And so year to date from May 15th, 253.
Here in Casper, Wyoming's second largest city, police respond to suicide calls twice as often as they do for shoplifting. 16 years ago, one of those calls came from Lance when he found Lyle at home. Lance had no idea his son was suicidal. No note was left behind.
How often do you think about Lyle?
Daily. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about him. Now, after his death, you know, it was horrible. And I came to a point where I realized that it was Lyle's decision and his decision only.
In this area, this is a widespread problem. Why do you think that is?
There's a lot of things going on. One of them is Wyoming's a rural state.
By landmass, Wyoming is the 10th largest state in the country. By population, it's the smallest, meaning even if you wanted help, help might be a long way from you.
This is what you see in most of Wyoming. You'll hit a major town about every 100 miles. And when I say major town, I mean a town of 5,000 people. You might get a call from somebody that's, 100 miles away from the nearest town. But you might also just not have mental health professionals. Wyoming has been a mental health shortage area, always.
Now, federal legislation to help any American in crisis reach a counselor by phone is set to launch July 16th. But in this state, even that will be an uphill climb to adopt.
I'm familiar with 911. What's 988?
So 988 will be the new 3-digit number for the suicide lifeline.
What does that mean specifically for Wyoming?
You're not going to find a cell tower every 50 miles or so here. And so making sure that we are meeting those infrastructure challenges is probably going to be our biggest, most expensive long-term project.
988 is being touted as a one-stop shop for anyone experiencing a mental health crisis. But funding the project so that healthcare providers are ready for the influx of calls is proving to be challenging. The Department of Health and Human Services expects the volume of calls to double within the first year. However, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, only 4 states have enacted a concrete plan for funding. The Central Wyoming Counseling Center is one of just 2 suicide hotline centers already up and running in Wyoming. It opened just 2 years ago. The workers there know this state's layout, its culture, its resources or lack thereof, all of which is essential in a crisis.
CWCC Suicide Lifeline, may I help you?
They've secured $2.1 million to expand the suicide hotline into a 24-hour service.
I'm glad you called today.
Most of it federal money from the American Rescue Plan Act that Governor Mark Gordon appropriated. But with the state legislature refusing to expand Medicaid, that federal funding will soon run out.
There's still a lot of work to make sure it's prepared for the rollout.
Absolutely.
And then the funding also runs out
Absolutely.
in 2 years.
Yep, we're going to be very busy the next year.
So what happens if, hypothetically, a person is 150 miles from the nearest crisis center or hospital, and they call because they're in a crisis?
Well, we roll out what we have in the area. Well, which might, if they need that level, if there's an imminent risk of death by suicide and law enforcement presence is needed, then we'll roll them out.
Around Casper, that happens often. As we sit down with Police Chief Keith McFeeters, he tells us his officers are responding to a suicide call as we speak.
The state of Wyoming is very much deeply indoctrinated in what I would describe as the cowboy culture. There's a cowboy code of ethics that really embodies, look, whatever the world can throw at me, I can find my way through this. But suicide and mental health are things that you may not be able to just kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps and see your way through.
With this culture, it can be a bit like the fact you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
It's my job then to put water everywhere I can. I can make enough resources available to them that at least they know where to find it.
And many who know the depths of suicide firsthand refuse to treat it as a foregone conclusion.
It's like you living in this negative, I guess, self-made hell.
Jason Whitmire attempted suicide some 10 years ago. He now works with Lance on the task force to stop others from doing the same.
I would imagine that there's a bond that you would have with people that know these dark depths.
Yeah, there is. But you don't get that feeling until you know their story. You can't bond if you don't know what they're into.
That's something Lance Nyberger still thinks about when he reflects on the loss of his son.
He didn't feel comfortable enough to come to me and say, Dad, life's kicking my butt. I'm really struggling here. And at the time of his death, when he needed me the most, I wasn't there for him because we were going in opposite directions instead of working together.
The messages that you give to someone who's lost someone close to them, that kindness that you extend to help them deal with that, do you extend the same kindness to yourself?
I've gotten better at it. For about 6 months, I didn't care whether I lived or died. It wasn't until our daughter gave birth about 7, 8 years ago to our granddaughter, I really realized what I would have missed had I not lived back then.
Wyoming has been referred to as just a small town with unusually long streets. And here, everyone seems to know someone who's dealt with suicide. For Lance, there's both horror and strength in that sentiment, that everybody is dealing with something, that pain is a universal burden we carry. But what Lance has learned is with a little effort and an open heart, it's possible to help others lighten the load.
It used to come out quite a bit right after his death. You realize that a sudden death like this, you can just wipe out everything else. He's going to be 17 forever.
Is that what fuels you to keep up with the work?
It is. That's what keeps me going. My faith and the fact that I truly believe I'll see him again someday. I'll be with him, and that's what's given me the hope to continue.
988, a bit of a lasso to try to curb the downside of that cowboy culture. Our thanks to Trevor. If you or someone that you know needs help, remember you are not alone. You can also call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline right now at 800-273-TALK. 988 launches on Saturday. Still ahead here on Prime, Twitter deal defunct. Billionaire Elon Musk responds to Twitter's threat to sue him for pulling out of a deal to buy the company. How's that impacting the stock market? We're taking a look by the numbers. Plus, former Secretary of State, she is to become current part of an NFL team. Condoleezza Rice's journey to minority owner. But first, our post of the day, Oprah Winfrey, iconic TV host, producer, actress, and philanthropist, with a heartfelt post honoring her father, who passed away yesterday. She said in part, "Peace still abides, all is well. Thank you for your prayers and good thoughts."
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Can
I hug you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House.
Destructive Cat 4 storm.
We're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
America is being poisoned with fentanyl, and we don't even know it.
Just heard my wife screaming. She told me they had just died.
50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Keep breathing, come on. It's poison, it's pure poison.
A few grains of salt worth of fentanyl will kill you.
Just my agency has seized enough to kill the entire country.
ABC News Live presents Poisoned, America's Fentanyl Crisis. The powerful series, streaming free on ABC News Live.
These days, with so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
While others are recapping yesterday's headlines,
We're bringing you the right now.
This is the busy border crossing. Steel barricades, another strike.
The Right Now look at the day ahead, how it affects you and your family.
Record high gas prices.
The threat of cyber warfare.
Is peace possible?
World News Now beginning at 2 a.m. Eastern, followed by America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
Streaming here on ABC News Live.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
As of today, in a big way, we have inaugurated abcnews.com.
A lot has changed in our world since Peter made that announcement. But what hasn't changed is the commitment to groundbreaking reporting and innovation at abcnews.com. And here's to everything ahead.
Welcome back, everyone. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, now wants to pull the plug on his much-publicized deal with Twitter. Today, that news sent the company's stock into a tailspin. Let's take a look by the numbers. Twitter's stock dropped more than 11% today after Musk made the announcement late Friday. Now the fate of the $44 billion bid to buy the social media giant may be determined by a drawn-out court battle. In the papers filed to the SEC, Musk accused Twitter of withholding data from him to verify facts about the business, like the fact that Twitter says less than 5% of its users are bots, a number that Musk believes is higher. Twitter stock has fallen roughly 37% since the deal was announced and is trading far under Musk's offering price of $54.20 a share. In the terms of the deal, Musk had agreed in some cases to pay a $1 billion fine if the deal falls apart. It's not clear if this means that he will have to fork over that money. The company says it intends to see the deal through, but of course, what ultimately happens remains to be seen. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. A new twist in the bombshell Amber Heard Johnny Depp case. Heard's attorney says one of the jurors on the panel did not belong there. Could this overturn that massive victory for Johnny Depp? We're asking an expert. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
so much at stake in our world right now. We wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion. The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
A ceremony to mark a landmark gun reform package at the White House today.
The action we take today is a step designed to make our nation the kind of nation we should be. It's about the most fundamental of things, the lives of our children, of our loved ones.
The law was passed after deadly mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. But not everyone gathered on the South Lawn was applauding it.
You have to do more than that. You have to do more than that. You have to open an office in the White House. Name a director. Prioritize this problem. Mr. President.
Manuel Oliver, the father of a victim from the Parkland shooting, heckled the president, saying the gun reform package didn't go far enough.
Amid growing calls to release surveillance video in one of the deadliest elementary school shootings in U.S. history, mixed opinions amongst Texas state officials on whether to do that. The state's Department of Public Safety agreeing to release the video, but the district attorney has objected and has instructed them not to do so. Meanwhile, a House committee continues its investigation into the police response that day. The gunman inside Robb Elementary for 77 minutes, killing 19 children and 2 teachers. Monday, the Uvalde County Sheriff and Texas Department of Public Safety Director testifying behind closed doors. The community still reeling. Hundreds gathered in the sweltering heat over the weekend to honor those lost back in May.
Record heat in Texas, pushing the power grid to the limit.
It happened in the depths of a frigid February 2 years ago, but so far hasn't happened during this historically hot July. But the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, has looked at the forecast and is concerned that during the 6 hottest hours of the day, power demand might exceed supply, forcing intentional blackouts. ERCOT is urging Texans to turn up their thermostats and to avoid doing laundry or the dishes until after sundown.
A birth control pill for women could soon be approved for sale over the counter at drugstores. HRA Pharma submitting an application to the FDA for approval of the first of its kind non-prescription pill to prevent pregnancy. The company's CEO calls it groundbreaking and noted the timing just weeks after the Supreme Court struck down the abortion rights law under Roe v. Wade, saying it's a sad coincidence. The FDA now needs to consider the application, the pill's safety and side effects. Approval could be a year away.
A guilty plea for a Real Housewives star. Jennifer Shaw, a cast member of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, entered a plea agreement with federal prosecutors in connection with a telemarketing scheme she took part in. The scheme defrauded hundreds of people throughout the U.S., many over the age of 55. Shaw pled guilty to attempt and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The agreement called for a sentence of up to 14 years in prison and Shaw to make restitution to the victims in an amount of over $9 million. Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice is now an NFL minority owner. The Walton Penner family ownership group, the newest owners of the Denver Broncos, announced that Rice is joining them. Rice lived part of her childhood in Denver and attended the University of Denver for college and grad school. She's also a noted football fan, having served on the inaugural College Football Playoff Committee. The ownership group, which purchased the Broncos last month, cited Rice's unique experience and extraordinary judgment for why she would be a great fit with the Broncos.
Now to a new twist in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case. Heard's attorneys now claim that one of the jurors who found her guilty of defamation was not supposed to be on the jury. They say he was never even called to jury duty. Eva Pilgrim has this story.
A new twist in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation battle.
Do you find that Mr. Depp has proven all the elements of defamation? Answer, yes.
Heard's team now pushing for a mistrial, claiming one of the jurors never should have been seated, writing, juror number 15 was not the individual summoned for jury duty on April 11th, 2022, and therefore was not part of the jury panel and could not have properly served on the jury at this trial. Overnight, a spokesperson for Heard telling ABC News exclusively, this may be the crack in the dike. There were a torrent of problems with this trial.
As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award compensatory damages in the amount of $10 million.
In June, 36-year-old Heard was found guilty of 3 defamation claims after being sued by her ex-husband Depp for $50 million over a 2018 Washington Post op-ed where she described herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse. Heard was ordered to pay $10.3 million in damages.
It's insane to hear heinous accusations of violence.
Heard, who countersued for $100 million, was awarded $2 million for one of her claims.
This is the most painful and difficult thing I've ever gone through.
But Heard's team now requesting a new trial, saying the wrong person showed up and was seated as a juror in the trial. The juror in question is 52 years old, born in 1970. But the person summoned, who lives at the same address with the same name, was born in 1945 and would have been 77 years old at the time of the trial. Heard's team arguing Ms. Heard had a right to rely on the basic protection that the jurors in this trial would be individuals who were actually summoned for jury duty.
Once people are summoned to jury duty, they need to sign in by phone and they need to use their date of birth. When they show up the next morning and say, I'm this person, I'm here for jury duty, they're accepted as the person that they claim to be.
Our thanks to Eva. And now to help us understand if and how this could all impact this high-profile case, we're joined now by Kimberly Whaley, a professor at the American University Washington College of Law. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. What kinds of implications could this have on the outcome of the Heard-Depp trial?
Well, it looks like from her motion, the goal would be to get a mistrial declared and get a brand new trial and a brand new jury to start over. I think she has a very high hurdle to overcome to achieve that, but it's not impossible.
Do you think that there's a chance that the verdict could be overturned?
As I said, I think it's highly unlikely because she has to prove a couple things. One, that this juror was somehow biased against her, and two, that it prejudiced the outcome, that if this hadn't happened, that maybe the verdict wouldn't have been in the direction against her. Really difficult to achieve both of those things. I think it's going to come down to whether this judge is at least willing to interview the juror, to find out whether the juror came to the jury panel with knowing that he wasn't who he said he was, and with some kind of malintent or ulterior motive, some kind of bias against her. But again, judges don't like to disturb jury verdicts. So just because something was not proper or or maybe not optimal, or even a little worse than that, maybe even misconduct, isn't normally enough to throw away the entire verdict. So I think she has a very high hill to climb, and frankly, her brief was pretty skimpy. Johnny Depp's response was much more substantive legally. So, in that regard as well, I'm not sure she's on the best possible footing to get a brand new trial.
Who's at fault here? It seems like there would be a lot of checks and balances to prevent this kind of thing from happening.
Exactly, and Depp's lawyers make that argument. They say, listen, you got the list of the jurors, and it had birthdays on it, and you admit in your paper that the person who showed up was in his 50s, not in his 70s. The person who was called was in his 70s. On the other hand, it looks like from the rules that when you show up for jury service in Virginia, you can show a Social Security card. You don't have to show ID that has an actual birthday. So I think her argument is, well, yeah, we should have checked, but the system failed me. But again, just the system failing as a technicality isn't going to get her the relief that she's seeking. And I think Depp also makes an argument that, you know, it was on her lawyers to double check it, not just the clerk and, you know, counsel and the judge here. The question will, again, come down to whether this judge decides to at least give her a hearing on this, at least allow her to probe this, to see if there was something nefarious about the fact that this juror apparently showed up for a long trial under the guise of being another family member with the same name living in the same home who was 20 years older.
And would you say that this is a desperate or a legitimate legal maneuver?
I think desperate is a bit unfair here. This is a legitimate legal maneuver. Arguably, her lawyers had some responsibility for, under the rules, it looks like it's their responsibility to make sure that the juror list matches up with the people in front of them. On the other hand, there are many people involved in this very high-profile trial. It was tried in the court of public opinion. I think if I represented her, I'd make that strong argument. Listen, there was a higher potential that the jurors came to this trial with a bias one way or the other, and the verdict arguably suggests that the facts didn't match up with the outcome. That is, you know, all that she had to do was show there was one instance of abuse, and that wouldn't have been defamatory. This was not about putting Johnny Depp in prison or even charging him with any kind of crime or any civil liability. He's the one who sued her, and all she had to show was one time that there might have been some domestic violence, and arguably she did do that, and the jury nonetheless found for him. So the atmospherics of it, I think, are in her favor, but again, I think it's very unlikely that this verdict will be disturbed.
Professor Kim Whaley, we thank you so much for your insight. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Before we go tonight, the image of the day, and it's one that's literally out of this world. You are looking at the deepest, most detailed, and oldest view yet of the cosmos. Today, NASA officials released the Webb telescope's first image. The light from this astounding photo depicts what a distant galaxy looked like 13 billion years ago. More photos will be released tomorrow. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Up in the next hour, we're staying on top of a few things. A reversal for the man who was once former President Trump's chief strategist, what it means now that Steve Bannon is offering to testify. Plus, COVID cases surge again. What's driving the spike? Stay with us.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms. Take America's #1 news with you, anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7, there for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
He thought he was God.
He's now one of the most vilified men in the world. He is the everyman. Zelensky is the Tom Hanks of Ukraine.
The fact that a little nice Jewish boy is 5'7" is showing up this KGB agent in the Kremlin.
What do you say to Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary?
Two men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
So what's good to read this summer? Well, Kate and I have decided to jump in and help you.
And we're talking with Oprah, John Irving, and so many popular authors and influencers.
So we want you to join us. Myself, Charlie Gibson, and my daughter, Kate Gibson.
Oh, hey, that's me.
That is you. For the new podcast series, it is called The Bookcase with Kate and Charlie.
We will make sure you love what you read.
Listen anywhere and anytime. The Bookcase Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour as parents and loved ones in Uvalde are still waiting for answers on how this massacre occurred. A spat over whether or not to release video from inside the school during a shooting has become even more complicated. Earlier today, a state legislator said an agreement about the video had been reached between law enforcement and local officials, but then hours later, Texas DPS said that they could not grant the request for the tapes without approval from the district attorney. ABC News reached out to the district attorney, but she did not immediately respond to our request for comment. Two men charged in connection with what police have said was a thwarted 4th of July mass shooting in Richmond, Virginia, were held without bond. The two men from Guatemala who are here illegally were arrested after Richmond police said that they received a tip from someone who said he overheard a conversation indicating there was an attack being planned on an Independence Day celebration in the capital city. Police seized 2 assault rifles, a handgun, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition from the Richmond home. A sunken World War II boat was discovered in Lake Mead, exposed by plunging water levels. The vessel laid sideways 185 feet below the water's surface and is now visible due to Lake Mead being at a historic low because of the mega drought. Now to a major reversal from former President Trump's chief of staff, Steve Bannon, on the eve of what's expected to be another bombshell January 6 hearing tomorrow afternoon. Bannon now says that he wants to testify before the January 6 committee, but wants to do so publicly and not behind closed doors. Our congressional correspondent Rachel Scott reports.
Tonight, a federal judge appointed by former President Donald Trump refusing to delay the trial of Steve Bannon, despite Bannon's last-minute offer to testify before the January 6th committee. On January 5th, Bannon had urged Trump supporters to head to Washington.
All happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in.
Why did you blow off Congress?
Bannon has refused to cooperate with the committee, citing executive privilege, even though he had not worked in the White House for years.
And from the start, he said he's willing to comply if they just resolve the privilege issue, which he feels he's bound by.
Now, with the trial just days away, Trump suddenly giving Bannon the green light to testify. But prosecutors fired back, saying Trump's own lawyer told them the former president never actually invoked executive privilege in the first place. Prosecutors insisting the only thing that has really changed is that Bannon's finally about to face the consequences of his decision.
Our thanks to Rachel. Tomorrow, watch live coverage of the January 6th committee hearings on ABC News beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Now to the race to save part of one of the crown jewels of our park system, Yosemite National Park and its rare and special trees. A massive wildfire is now burning towards some of the oldest giant sequoias on the planet as a new heat wave spreads across the west. The Washburn fire has roared to life, doubling in size in 24 hours. More than 1,600 residents and visitors have been ordered to flee. Will Carr reports now from the park.
Tonight, the desperate fight to save the sequoias in Yosemite National Park. More than 500 firefighters battling the flames from the air. And on the ground, crews digging fire lines and removing dead debris. We have seen fire crews attacking this area. You can see this brush is bone dry. It is perfect fuel for this fire, and you can feel the heat coming off those flames. The Washburn fire growing tonight, already scorching more than 2,000 acres, doubling in size in just 24 hours. It's now 25% contained.
It's scary. I'm just hoping the firefighters, they know what they're doing. I'm just hoping that they keep it that way as much as possible.
Some flames reaching the sequoias in the park's iconic Mariposa Grove. Firefighters quick to jump on them. The park home to some 500 sequoias, including the ancient 200-foot tall grizzly giant.
The fire did get into the grove a little bit, and it didn't get much further. And part of that is because there's been a history of prescribed fire in here to really create a fuel situation where there's not a lot to burn on the ground.
Those prescribed fires intentionally set, protecting the trees, allowing them to grow. Crews setting up sprinklers to protect the trees, soaking the base of the trees and increasing the humidity. While fires have threatened these parts for centuries, hotter temperatures and drought conditions linked to climate change are creating a perfect storm for these fires. Conditions are drier, hotter, and windier, creating the most dangerous conditions seasoned firefighters have ever seen. More than 1,600 residents and campers ordered to evacuate the area. Satellite images showing smoke from the blaze stretching as far as the Bay Area. While fire crews are doing everything they can to protect these sequoias, this fire's continuing to burn through dangerously dry fuels. The winds are supposed to be low here the rest of the week, so fire crews are hoping to up those containment numbers in a fire that will likely burn for weeks. Lindsay.
Just massive trees there. Our thanks to Will Carr. Now to the latest on the coronavirus. Scientists are tracking a subvariant of Omicron that's the most transmissible yet and already dominant here in the U.S. 3/4 of Americans are now living in counties with medium or high COVID risk levels.
Tonight, with COVID resurging, experts are warning the subvariant BA.5 could be the most transmissible Omicron variant yet.
Omicron BA.5 has mutations in its spike protein that give it the ability to escape antibodies both from vaccines and from infections from previous Omicron subvariants.
BA.5 is driving COVID infections and now makes up more than half of the country's new cases. And health officials in Los Angeles and New York are once again urging people to mask up indoors.
Better safe than sorry. That's what I said. It's a simple thing to put on a mask.
Nearly 3/4 of Americans are now living in a county at medium or high risk of COVID. The country is averaging 100,000 new cases daily, but since most home tests go unreported, experts warn that number could actually be 7 times higher, and more Americans are going into hospitals.
BA.5 doesn't seem to be causing more severe illness, but just like with every new variant, if it's spreading fast, it causes more infection. Ultimately, we will see an impact in our hospitals.
Moderna today reporting its new booster produced 6 times more antibodies against the BA.4 and 5 subvariants a month after injection. But that new shot won't likely be available until October or November at the earliest.
There is some urgency to figure out the composition of the vaccine for the fall. We don't want to be in a situation where we have a rise in cases ahead of vaccination and we're trying to play catch up.
71 million Americans still haven't received a single vaccine shot. More than half of the eligible population has not gotten their first booster.
People still being urged to get vaccinated. Eva Pilgrim joins us now. Eva, getting back to what Moderna said today about its new booster that has more antibodies against this BA.5 variant than the current vaccine. That's good news, of course, but how soon until it's ready?
That's right, Lindsay. Moderna says its vaccine candidate produced almost twice as many antibodies as its current vaccine. Moderna plans to submit its data to the FDA later this week. The White House says we can expect to see a rollout in October or November. Lindsay.
All right, Eva Pilgrim, our thanks to you. Tonight in Japan, preparations are underway for the funeral of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated on Friday. A hearse carrying his coffin arrived at a temple in Tokyo where mourners paid their respects. Meanwhile, the investigation into the suspect's motive continues as we learn new details about his homemade weapon in a country where gun violence is extremely rare. ABC's Bob Woodruff has the latest from Tokyo.
Tonight, we're learning more about the possible motive in the shocking assassination of the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Police say 41-year-old Tetsuya Yamagami, a former member of the Japanese Navy, confessed to killing Abe during a campaign event Friday, and that he planned the attack for about a year and reportedly had planned to use an explosive. But in order to target only Abe instead of a large group, he decided to use a gun instead. Japanese media also reporting that the gunman allegedly decided to attack Abe after watching a video message Abe sent to his mother's church, which the gunman blamed for her financial ruin. That church, a controversial group called the Unification Church, known in the U.S. as the Moonies, named after their founder, Sun Myung Moon. But the Unification Church said there is no record of asking the suspect's mother for large donations. Authorities also acknowledged security failures and are investigating how the gunman was able to get so close to Abe, allegedly firing 2 shots from a homemade gun, seen here, 2 barrels bound together with black tape. The suspect reportedly telling police he learned how to build guns from videos posted online.
They make it all too available. Bob Woodruff joins us now from Japan. Bob, what have you learned about the suspect's alleged planning leading up to that attack?
You know, a couple of very pieces of new information here. One is that the local media actually reports that the suspect allegedly test-fired his homemade guns in the mountains and actually attended another Abe campaign event the day before the assassination itself. Lindsay.
All right, Bob Woodruff for us. Thanks, as always. Now to the war in Ukraine, the civilian death toll continues to rise, and we're learning in areas where Russia has taken control, they're fast-tracking applications for Russian citizenship. James Longman reports in from Ukraine tonight.
Tonight, the White House says it believes Iran is ready to provide hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles, including armed drones, to Russia and give their fighters training to use them in the war in Ukraine.
Our information indicates that the Iranian government is preparing to provide Russia with up to several hundred UAVs, including weapons-capable UAVs, on an expedited timeline.
White House officials say it's not clear if Iran has delivered any of these drones to Russia yet, but says the training could begin before the end of this month. All this as Russia presses its attacks in eastern Ukraine. And tonight, after more than 30 hours under the rubble of a Russian strike, somehow this man was brought out alive. 33 people are now known to have died in this attack on an apartment block in eastern Ukraine. The moment the missile hit, caught in this video circulating online. The building almost obliterated, and more than 20 people are still thought trapped. Valery prays outside for his sister and 9-year-old nephew. Now I'm waiting for a miracle, he says. Russian strikes raining down across the country as their troops push further into Donetsk. That's the second of the 2 provinces that make up the Donbass region of the east. And Moscow has started fast-tracking Russian passports for Ukrainians in areas that they occupy. Ukraine has condemned that as another act of Russification. That's the effort to claim land permanently. Lindsay?
James, thank you. Next tonight to the man who shot Ronald Reagan, who now says he's ready to move forward with his life. Our Nightline anchor Juju Chang sat down with him 2 weeks after he was released from federal supervision and has this report.
Hello, everybody.
Why sit down and do this interview?
I'm trying to show the public that I'm not the person that I was so many years ago.
That people shouldn't be judged on their worst action.
Yes.
And yet, obviously, you did more than most on your worst day.
Didn't make much sense.
That day was March 30th, 1981.
And here you see the president coming out now. We just have to watch. I don't know whether we can hear this or not. There. Shots. God.
25-year-old John Hinckley Jr. tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan.
There are 2 or 3 people here they're taking away. Yes, he appears to be blonde. He is seized as the suspect.
Hinckley's shooting spree would make him one of the most notorious criminals in American history. A bullet puncturing President Reagan's lung, almost killing him. A Secret Service agent and police officer also wounded. Hinckley's 4th victim, Press Secretary Jim Brady, suffering brain damage, paralyzed for life. John Hinckley was charged with 13 crimes, later acquitted by reason of insanity.
I was the most scrutinized mental patient in America. Even my judge said that.
And now, at 67, he is free after 41 years under medical supervision. He spent 34 of those years here at St. Elizabeth's Psychiatric Hospital in Washington, D.C., eventually becoming an outpatient and living with his mother. His medications and movements remained supervised. But all that came to an end with a court ruling this past June. His freedom, a test of redemption, at the intersection of gun violence and mental illness.
I worked hard. I walked the line for 41 years and did everything I needed to do to get my freedom.
Can you understand why some would see you as a danger to society?
Not now, no.
Why?
Because I'm not. If they want to think I'm the person that I was 41 years ago, yes, I could see that, but that's not the person I am now.
Just before the assassination attempt, Hinckley told us he felt cut off from society.
What was going on in your mind?
I was just totally depressed, totally despairing of my life. I thought I had nowhere to turn. I had become totally estranged from my family. That was the worst part of it. I was totally isolated.
An undiagnosed psychiatric disorder made him obsessed with the movie Taxi Driver.
You talking to me?
About a loner plotting to assassinate a presidential candidate. The film starred Jodie Foster, who Hinckley was stalking in real life.
I don't know who's weirder, you or me.
I had the delusion back in 1981 that by shooting the president, I could impress Jodie Foster, which to me saying that now, it's ridiculous, but that's what I believed back then. It was in ways like a suicide attempt, just saying, this is it, this is the end of my life.
He was diagnosed with 5 severe mental disorders and found to have serious defects in reality, testing, insight, and judgment, making him an unpredictably dangerous person.
Do you ever worry that you might relapse?
No, I take my meds. Even though I don't have to now, I still take my meds.
I read that you take an anti-anxiety and an antipsychotic, is that right?
Yes.
What makes you feel that you can be trusted? I mean, do you trust yourself?
I do.
Not to relapse?
I've always felt the meds help, and I still feel that way.
Because a lot of people think if you're criminally insane, that's incurable.
It's not incurable. I'm sitting here as proof positive that it's curable.
Hinckley's crimes back in 1981 changed gun control in the U.S. In 1993, James Brady and his wife Sarah helped pass the Brady Act.
And the Brady law ushered in a waiting period and background checks.
Right.
Especially with regard to people who are suffering mental illness.
I certainly don't think the mentally ill should have access to guns. I mean, that's kind of obvious. Background checks are good and waiting periods are good. I think there's too many guns in America.
And coming from you, that's quite a statement.
Well, I hope it is. Because that's the way I feel.
There was no background check system when Hinckley bought his gun at a Texas pawn shop with a fake ID, a felony offense. Though Hinckley says he's wanted to apologize for years, he's been prohibited by law from contacting his victims and their families.
Ronald Reagan famously forgave you. What message do you have for the Reagan family now?
Well, for the Reagan family, for the Brady family, for the families of the other 2 victims, for Jodie Foster, I apologize for what I've done, for what I did 41 years ago. I'm truly sorry, I really am. I'm not sure they could forgive me, and I probably wouldn't even blame them if they don't forgive me. If I could take it back, I surely would. And I pray for the family every night.
I remember that day as if it was yesterday.
Danny Spriggs was a Secret Service agent on President Reagan's detail, seen here that day. He was uninjured and became Hinckley's arresting officer.
I believe in rehabilitation for individuals for certain crimes. In this particular case, we had 2 individuals who received injuries that disabled them for the rest of their lives. I don't necessarily think he's earned the right to be free.
He extended his apologies not just to the Reagan family, the Brady family, Jodie Foster, and all of the agents on that day. Do you accept his apology?
I do not accept his apology because I don't think the sufficient accountability has been rendered in this particular case.
You could see why somebody would be skeptical.
That's why I'm talking to you and trying to show that I'm not that person anymore.
Do you think you've paid your debt to society?
Yes, I do.
In what way?
I worked hard to overcome my illness and I'm trying to give back to the world now through my music and my art. And that's kind of my way of paying back my debt to society.
Lots of mixed emotions in response to his thoughts there. Our thanks to Juju Chang. And still to come, a rush of the president's residence by thousands of Sri Lankans, the demand for the country's leaders to resign, and their response. Plus, brought together by chance and DNA. My conversation with a woman who found out that she had 35 siblings she never knew about. This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
Here at the White House. Destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye. Let's go. We made it.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
Welcome back. We're tracking several headlines around the world. The president of Sri Lanka is due to resign on Wednesday after thousands rushed his residence in Colombo over the weekend. Protesters are now waiting for the cabinet to resign and make way for a new government after all the unrest. People are still there today as they strolled and toured the colonial-era buildings, with armed soldiers and police making no attempt to stop them. The prime minister's cabinet members have said that they would resign after an all-party government is formed. Police are hunting for 5 attackers who burst into a bar in South Africa and killed 15 customers in a hail of at least 137 bullets over the weekend. This attack, along with 2 other weekend shootings, have unleashed a wave of anger at the police for failing to tackle high levels of violent crime. About 20,000 people are murdered in South Africa every year out of a population of roughly 60 million. Monsoon rains over the past month have killed at least 150 people as downpours continue to lash Pakistan, triggering flash flooding in some parts of the country. The monsoon rains also damaged homes, roads, 5 bridges, and power stations across the country. Heavy rains and flash floods fully or partially damaged more than 1,000 houses there. Experts say climate change is the culprit behind the deluge. What makes a family normal? In her debut memoir, Krista Bilton addresses those complexities and shares how a hidden secret brought shocking consequences for dozens, if not possibly hundreds, of unsuspecting families that chose Donor 150 from the California Cryobank. Krista, author of Normal Family on Truth, Love, and How I Met My 35 Siblings, joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Lindsay.
So you found out that you had other siblings in 2005 from a New York Times article. The headline reads, "Hello, I'm your sister. Our father is donor 150. Walk us through that moment and just how you processed it.
So my mother found out that my father had been a prolific sperm donor from a story in the Times. And then she proceeded to keep that a secret from my sister and I for a good period of time, until she discovered that one of my biological siblings was potentially my brother. And so she had to tell us.
And your mother was a single gay woman in the 80s, wanting to have children of her own. When Jeffrey Wright, your father, came forward to the world as donor 150, it was especially hard for her, who thought that Jeffrey had never donated sperm to anyone else. How did your family then come together after that news broke?
So my mother found my father in a hair salon when she was on what she would call a manhunt for a father for her kids. And he walked in and she took him out to lunch and asked him if she could pay him to father her child. So that was the origin story of how he came into our life. And then he started secretly donating after that. And, you know, as a young adult, discovering that I had this larger biological family was difficult for me at first. And I wanted, at that time, nothing to do with the biological siblings. But then a set of wild circumstances happened that changed my perspective on that.
Can you share a bit of what changed that perspective, or people have to buy the book?
No, I can. I went to a tiny art school in Italy that no one's ever heard of for classical painting. And one of my biological sisters, a woman named Jennifer, also went to that tiny school.
Oh, wow.
And that was such a wild coincidence that it sort of opened my heart and my mind up to her. And then she was very excited about this unexpected biological family. And I realized that my perspective on all of it was a choice and not a foregone conclusion. And it didn't have to be this heavy, dark thing.
And you write, the thought of new family members brought a new burden of responsibility to a family that already had more than its share. You described this heartbreaking moment where your mom says, "I think your boyfriend might be your brother." Was that true, or more of just a comment on the widespread use of your father's sperm?
No, she was concerned that he was actually my biological brother. And that's, you know, I didn't get too deep. There have been things that have happened in that story since I wrote the book, but just to preserve the anonymity of that family, I don't want to talk too much about it. But yes, the younger siblings of the boy that I was dating are my biological siblings. And the question that hovered over us was whether he was or not.
And sperm banks are only required to follow FDA regulations for screening and testing of reproductive tissue donors. Is there something that you think can or should be done in order to prevent situations like this?
In Britain, they've made it so that donors can only donate to conceive 10 children. But in the United States, it's still the Wild West, and this industry is completely unregulated. And there's no limit on how many times a donor can donate or how many children can be conceived through one donor. And I do think it's something that needs to be regulated. I wouldn't take back any of the siblings. I'm close with several of them now, and I'm so glad that they all exist. But, you know, once you start accidentally dating your siblings, then I think something has to be done to prevent that in the future.
Of course. And throughout the book, you reconcile with your past, including mental illness, addiction, poverty, to intergenerational trauma. What do you learn about yourself from revisiting these difficult parts of your life?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I think in a big way, this book is a coming of age story about coming to terms with where we come from and unpacking the stories of our parents' childhoods and their own secret traumas or mental or biological or spiritual struggles, and then looking at the threads of how those impact our lives and what we might be unconsciously carrying around.
There's so many great quotes out there about how, like, no one gets through childhood unscathed, that kind of a thing. When you talk about family, what do you hope that others will take away about their own at this point?
I do hope that in an era where there are more kids being born through sperm donation and there are different types of families that are being created, that, you know, people are open to the beauty of some of these connections.
We all have families and kind of understand the idea of the point of origin family and the family that we then kind of choose for ourselves. Krista, we thank you so much for talking with us. And to our viewers, you can buy Normal Family on Truth, Love, and How I Met My 35 Siblings wherever books are sold.
No, thank you so much, Lindsay.
And still to come, a boy and his fire department. A look inside a sweet friendship that is inspiring a future firefighter in tonight's Local Lowdown.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions, straightforward reporting, no spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Take America's #1 news with you, anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Ready for a little GMA-ish promo? Okay, here we go. GMA 7A every day with Robin, George, and Michael. That's how you start the day. Boom!
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Firefighters are often the first to jump into danger to help others. And when a group of Glendale, Arizona firefighters responded to a call for a house fire, they met a little boy who vowed to grow up to be just like them. Reporter Javier Soto from our partner station KNXB shows us the sweet friendship between a boy and his fire department in tonight's Local Lowdown.
The look on Micah Watson's face as Glendale Fire rolls on a call says it all.
Cool.
The 3-year-old's visit to Fire Station 157.
What kind of truck is this? A ladder truck.
Only confirming
I want to see that.
what he already knew.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A firefighter. Can I wear an air tank?
We'll try it.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Cool.
According to Dad, his fascination with firefighting started years ago with a YouTube video,
I like the chainsaw.
leading to his little boy's obsession.
Can I make a noise with it?
We won't fire it up, but you can hold it.
This is
What do you think?
heavy.
Pretty cool? Yeah, it is pretty heavy, huh?
I'm done with it.
Okay, you're done with it.
What are those conversations like?
He just acts it out, you know. He acts like he's always on a mission, suiting up, grabbing his little axe, and pretending like he's putting out fires around the house.
A few weeks ago, he was ready to go when a fire broke out at his neighbor's house.
When she went to the door, it was so hot that she could feel the heat when she got up to the front door, and she opened it, and obviously she was a little scared. It was overwhelming, and he just ran to get his suit, and he just said it's time to suit up and put on his suit and wanted to go run to the fire. She had to stop him.
That led to his instant friendship with Glendale Fire Captain John Good.
Of course, we noticed him right away. He had all of his turnout gear on, and he was kind of going through all the motions and emulating everything that we were doing on the fire ground, so we thought it was super cute.
Cute enough to get invited to the station where Micah got to live out his fantasy of being a firefighter.
Put your right foot in that one. Put your arms, there you go.
I want that one on.
You want this one on?
Yeah. I want the jacket.
You ready to go fight a fire?
Yeah.
Putting on the turnouts.
On that.
Climbing on the ladder truck.
Hi, Mom. The house?
She's like a real firefighter now.
Yeah. I want to do it again.
And spraying water.
And then this adjusts the stream.
Cementing his friendship.
Can I see the stuff inside there? What is it for?
We use this to pull down ceilings to check for fire above us in the attics.
Whoa.
Pretty cool, huh? You know, we don't see a lot of innocence anymore, and so, you know, whenever we have an opportunity to interact with young kids like that, it's great.
I want that.
While planning his future.
Can I turn the light on?
Push this red button right here. Now let's go look and see.
Whoa, light came on.
See, you did that. You turned all those lights on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I drive it?
You can't drive. I don't think you're old enough to drive yet.
How come you want to be a firefighter?
Just for, like, I just want a giant fire truck for that. And a fire pool. But I want my own kitchen. I want my giant kitchen.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Michael will be driving that fire truck soon enough. And that is our show for tonight. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
He thought he was God.
He's now one of the most vilified men in the world. He is the everyman. Zelensky is the Tom Hanks of Ukraine.
The fact that a little nice Jewish boy is 5'7" is showing up this KGB agent in the Kremlin.
What do you say to Americans who see Russia and you not only as a rival, but an unfriendly adversary?
Two men at war.
Which Vladimir will take over. The world is not going to be the same.
A Boy Scout is trustworthy.
Loyal, courteous, kind, brave, and obedient.
Scouts help other people at all times. They leave no trace.
One thing about scouting, once you're in, you don't leave.
Parents gave the Boy Scouts the most valuable thing they had, their children. And the Boy Scouts told parents, you can trust us. We will be good for your son.
The leadership of the Boy Scouts had identified over 1,000 men that were using the program to abuse boys. They viewed this as a fire to be put out, a secret to be kept.
At first, he was just a nice guy. It wasn't even like a week. It was the night I got there, he started doing stuff. I just thought, what is going on? And is this normal? It got much worse from that.
They're unbelievably heartbreaking stories. So many of them are haunted by who they would have become if this never happened to them.
We started saying, oh my God, there were troop leaders being found to have abused children at one troop, and then a year later at another troop, and again and again and again.
They were expecting about 7,500 claimants.
And the numbers just kept going up and up and up.
It's not just about a financial settlement. It's about Boy Scouts admitting that they did wrong.
I don't think you can put a price on that. This is about figuring out how to move from victim to survivor.
I'm 40 years old before I tell someone. And when the detective says he confessed to abusing you, I must have read the email 100 times because I no longer had to prove to people that I was abused. I was free.
ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This Motel 6 in southern New Mexico may not look like much. There's no swimming pool or room service. The only scenery is the I-10 across the way. But for these families who have just journeyed across the Mexican border, it's a godsend.
Sometimes they haven't eaten for 3 days. Sometimes they've had to share meals.
About 2 times a week, around 50 or so migrants are dropped off at this pop-up shelter called Colores United, run out of a couple of local hotels. Why are you operating out of this hotel?
There's no other space that we're available to us. We hope that'll change one day, but we can't wait. We need a shelter, and we needed it now.
But some in Deming worry that this could be the start of a new surge in arrivals. Why are you concerned with migrants coming?
What I'm concerned with is, are we going to be able to process them? There's no way that we could dedicate the kind of manpower. There's just no way.
This town, a microcosm of the crisis at the southern border, grappling daily with the complexities and shortfalls of our nation's immigration system.
Breaking headline involving immigration and the situation on the U.S.-Mexico border.
Title 42, that Trump-era policy that allows Border Patrol to turn away migrants to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Title 42 has been challenged in federal court, but for now, it remains in effect. Separately, the Supreme Court just overturned another Trump-era policy, referred to as Remain in Mexico, that forced migrants who are claiming asylum to await entry to the U.S. in Mexico. Tonight, we speak to the asylum seekers in the crosshairs, the ones fleeing for their lives. The coyotes helping them cross. Are you worried that what you're doing is illegal?
Para lo que a unos es ilegal, para nosotros es legal.
And the activists offering refuge when the journey becomes too dangerous. What do you say to those people who say migrants should come and do it the right way?
If you're running from violence, what is the right way?
It's cramped quarters, but we can't complain.
Adriana Saludares founded this shelter in 2019. Most of the migrants she helps have already placed an asylum request with immigration officials so they can legally stay in the U.S. as their cases are processed.
I tease that nobody chooses Deming. They're just moving through. It might just be a stopover, and then they're going to wherever they're going. Recent arrivals here come from as near as Colombia and as far as Turkey, but they are the lucky ones. Some asylum seekers from other countries like Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras are more often turned away under the controversial Trump-era policy, Title 42. It's a health policy meant to slow the spread of COVID-19, but activists say it does much more. Personally, it has kept a lot of individuals from being able to fulfill their constitutional right. It's not a migration or an immigration control. It never was meant to be, but that's how it got used.
It is a legal requirement in the U.S. to allow people who get to the United States to apply for asylum. What Title 42 has done is create a legal fiction that says that people are not in the United States and therefore don't have the right to apply for asylum.
It's estimated that as many as 18,000 migrants will cross into the U.S. if the policy is lifted, more than double the 7,000 a day currently coming. Deming's mayor, Benny Hasso, is concerned for his town if Title 42 goes away.
I don't fault them for wanting a better life. The only difference now is that we do not have the volunteer base right now to establish a shelter. We don't.
Is the federal government providing resources that you might need in case there are asylum seekers that do qualify for asylum that might end up in this area?
Not to us.
Clint Hogan is the Deming police chief. Do you feel, Chief, that it creates any kind of security issues when you have the migrants come here?
No, ma'am. We don't have any issues with the people there at all.
But Ariana says her experience has been different. You had mentioned that the city is becoming more anti-immigrant by the day. Can you explain that?
There's only a few, but they just so happen to be the loudest that will say the worst things.
Ariana and her staff have noticed an increasing hostility. What kind of threats are you getting?
We were told that they would figure out a way for me to lose my home if I had them on my house and my property.
But Ariana refuses to abandon these families in need.
¿Cómo se siente aquí con mi grupo de Colores Unidos en la shelter acá?
Pues tranquila, tranquila, sí, pues de donde